Hi all, today in this video we are going to cover very interesting and new topic, which is like how to create a full stack application using React as a front end, Spring Boot as a backend, and MongoDB as a database. These are the prerequisites which we are going to use in order to build this full stack application. We are going to use VS Code and Spring Tool Suite, React and Java, Spring Boot and MongoDB as a database. At high level, the points which we are going to cover are like, first we will see the introduction. Next, we are going to see the architecture diagram. Next, we are going to I will show you the user interface of our application. Next, we are going to create a database and collection in MongoDB database. Next, we are going to create our backend application using Spring Boot, and these are the points which we are going to create in sequence. Like, first we will create a new Spring Boot application. Next, we will configure the MongoDB database in that. Next, we are going to implement the CRUD operations using REST API. And finally, we will test our CRUD APIs using Postman. On the front-end side, we are going to create our front-end application using React, and we are going to create a new React front-end application using React.js. Next, like, we are going to create a table using React table library. Next, like, we are going to integrate front-end API functionality with backend REST APIs. And finally, we will test our application functionality end-to-end through UI browser. This is the architecture of our whole user system, in which these are the subsystems. Like, we have user web as a client application, and backend side we are going to create a user service, and on the back database as the database MongoDB we are going to use. So while creating the user web application, we are going to use React.js, and in that we are going to use React table library in order to create table, populate it with data on columns, and we are going to use functions and hooks available in that to achieve main functionalities like search, sorting, and pagination part. For that, we are going to use the functions and hooks available in React table library. Again, apart from that, we are going to use axios library in order to give call to the backend REST APIs. So this is about the front end side. On the backend side, we are going to create a user service backend service using Spring Boot, and in that we are going to implement CRUD operations using Spring REST API. On the database side, we are going to use MongoDB, and in order to create a database and collection on the MongoDB side, we are going to use MongoDB Compass graphical user interface. So this is about the overall architecture and the subsystems which we are going to implement from scratch in this video. So let us start with our first user demo, so that you can visualize how our application will look like once we build and run into the browser. So this is the user interface. Here you can see this is the header part. This is the add and edit panel, wherein we can add our user or edit the user. Let's say we can add one user, let's say Kiran, and we can add the respective email ID for that. And let's say city, we can say, let's say Pune, and we can click on add button, and we can see the record is added successfully. Similar way, we can add one more record, let's say Praveen, and we can add ID for email ID for Praveen, and address we can say it's Mumbai, and we can add. We can see the Praveen is added successfully. So this is about the addition. And if you want to edit anything, so let's say instead of Praveen we can add it as a Pramod, and same we can modify it for the email, and instead of Mumbai we can add Bangalore, and we can update it. Now go to the last record. Yes, we can see this is updated successfully as expected. So this is about the updation part. So here whenever we click on update button, these text boxes will get populated with this the row on basis of what row we have clicked, and this add button label will get changed with the update button, and here cancel button will get enabled once we click on cancel, so it will clear everything. This is about the updation part. Now next thing, like we can delete any record. Let's say once we click on delete, it will show the confirmation box. Once we click on that, the record will get deleted. We can see the record is deleted successfully. So this is about the CRUD operations which we are going to implement. Apart from that, we have some core functionalities like searching, filter. Let's say we can search for Vijay, and you can see here it is the text is the data will get filtered out on basis of what text we are entering it here. Let's say for address it is filtering, and for user ID as well. So this filter is applicable to all the data columns and table data. Next thing, like we are going to implement the sorting as well. So you can see the data will get sorted on in ascending or descending order, and this is for name column, this is for email column, and address as well. So this is about the sorting functionality, which again we are going to cover in this video. Apart from that, we are going to implement the pagination part, in which you can see we have first button, previous button, this is the page count, and this is the page index, and this is the page count, and we have next and last button. So in this, like we are now on the first page, hence first and previous button is disabled, and this is the page index now it is showing. So once we click on next button, it will take us to the next page, and likewise it will keep on taking us until we reach the last page. So once we reach on the last page, the next and last button will get disabled because we do not have any further page to show. Similar way, whenever we click on the previous button, it will take us to the previous page, same way. And once we reach on the first page, the first and previous button will get disabled because we do not have any previous page to show. So similar way, once we click on last button, it will take us to the last page, and on click of first button, it will take us to the first page. So this is about the pagination. In and all, like we are going to cover all the CRUD operations, and we are going to achieve this searching, sorting, and pagination part. And with that, like this video is going to be very interesting, so I will request you to please watch this from start to end, so that you will not miss any functionality in between. So let us start with our backend part. First of all, we will create our database on on MongoDB side. For that, we are going to use Compass, MongoDB Compass, to create the database. We can connect it. So these are the default databases which are already there. We can delete this existing one, so that we can create a new one and make a fresh start. Fine. So these are the default databases like admin, config, and local. If we want to create a new database, we can click on plus button. Here we can mention our new database name, like let's say here we can mention user master. This is the database name, and here for collection we can give collection name as a users. Here we are not going to create a table because it's a MongoDB database and it is a document oriented, hence it will consider the collection and documents only, not the table, and it does not follow any predefined schemas and all. So this is about, we have created the user underscore master database, and inside that we have created this users collection. So on the database side, with that, like we have created our database and collection. So let us create our backend application using Spring Boot and configure the database, MongoDB database part. So let me switch to the workspace. Let me close this application now. So here we can use this third option, create new Spring Startup project, to create our backend application. Here we can name our service as an user service. We can give Maven as a build type, Java 17 as a version, and for group we can mention com.user. Artifact ID user hyphen service we will keep as is, and here for description we can mention user service application, and for package we can mention com.user. We can cross verify it once and click on next. Here we need to add the dependency. Let's say first we need to add Spring Web, next we need to add Spring Data MongoDB, and finally we can add Lombac, and we can click on next and finish. We can cross check our dependency in pom.xml file if everything is added as expected. So we can see it is added. Fine. Now let us build our application using run as Maven install. To build it, next thing, like, we can run our application using run as Spring Boot application. Fine, we can see our application has started successfully on port 8080. Now let us start by configuring our MongoDB database part in our Spring Boot application. First of all, we can change our port number. Instead of default port, which is 8080, we can use 8088. Next thing, like, we need to configure our MongoDB database related attributes. Let's say here we can add first host, and we can mention it's a local host. Similar way, we need to add port, and for port we can mention it's a 20017. For port you can go it here and see it's a 27017. Same, we have mentioned it here. Next thing, like, we can add database part, and our database name is user underscore master. Next thing, like, we need to add URI. So if you want to cross check the database, it's our user underscore master. Same need to be configured it here. And for URI we can add MongoDB, and here is our local host and port name 20717, and here is our database name, which is user underscore master. That's it. Next thing, like, we need to add one more thing, like auto index creation. We can say it's a true, because we want the ID to be incremented by 1 each time we add the user to database, new user to database. So we are done with our database, MongoDB database configuration on the Spring Boot side. Now let us add the actual API related implementation part. So let us create the packages first. We need document package. In a relational database we used to create an entity, but here it is a document oriented database, hence we need document package. Next we need repository package. Next we need service package, and finally we are going to create controller. so the controller package is required. So we have created all the required packages. Now let us add required component, respective component and classes or interfaces in this. Now let us add one document inside this document package, and our document name is user. Fine. We can annotate it using the document, and here we can mention the actual collection name, and our collection name is users. We can add the properties for this user document. Let's say first is id, next we can add name, next we can add email, and next we can add address. You can save it. Now we need to add id annotation for this id. Next thing, like this email should be unique. It should not allow the duplicate emails or the same email for multiple users. Unique, we can make it unique as a true, and we can add non-null. Fine. Next thing, like we need to add one sequence name which we can create for user sequence we need to create, so that we can create a sequence. It will hold the sequence number. Can use private static final string, and here we can say it's a sequence name, and we can mention sequence name like users sequence. So this is the transient variable. We have made it transient because we don't want it to be stored into the database, and this will hold the temporary sequence which we will use in order to increment our id by 1. Fine. Now we need to add all the required annotations, like let's say we need all our constructors, no all constructors, data builder, and we can save it. Fine. Now next thing, like we are done with our document part. Now next thing, we can add the repository, and we can create a repository with name like user repository. Here we can annotate it using repository, and this repository extends Mongo repository, and here we need to add our document name and the data type as a long, and we need to add the import for this one. So we are done with our repository part. Let us add the service interface with name user service, and here we can mention all the methods which we want to implement. Let's say here first it should return all the users, so we can add one method for that. Next we can add one more method which will return user on basis of id, and here we can pass the id as an input. Next we can use one method for as an create user, which will allow us to create user into the database, create new user into the database, and here we can pass the input as a user. We can create one more method as an update user, and we can create one more method for delete user. You can save it. So we have added all the required methods which need to be added to achieve the all the CRUD operations. Now we can create one service implementer class with name user service impl, and here we can annotate it with service stereotype, and this class should implement our user service interface. We can provide the default method implementation by using this option. Now here we need to auto-wire or inject our repository so that we can call methods on our repository. Now here we can give actual implementation for each method. So let's say for get all users we can call find all method on this one. Similar way for return by id we can call find by id method. So here it is returning optional, so we can call the get method to get the exact object. Here we need to save our object, so we can call save method and pass this input user object. Similar way we can add for update method, and this is for delete method. So for delete method here we can see the return type of delete is void, so we need to prepare some string and return like user is we can call user is deleted successfully for user id, and here we can mention the user id. Fine. So this message will get returned post successful deletion of the user. So we are done with our service part. Now let us create our controller, and we can create our controller with name user controller. So here we can annotate it using REST controller. Next thing we can inject service component at here, and our service name is user service. Now we can call the get mapping for getting all the users. This is the API. Here we need to add our endpoint, which is users/users, and this will return the list of users, and the method name should be get all users. Fine. Here we do not need to pass the input at here. Now we need to call the respective method on this service part so that it will return all the users. And add import. Fine. Now here we can add a response entity instead of a list of users. It should wrap the return type into the response entity, which is good, always good. So we are done with our first API. which is like to return all the users available in the database. Now next thing, like we can implement one more API, get API, which will return a specific user based on what ID we have passed. So we can change the method name like get user by ID, and here we need to pass the ID. Here we can add use path variable, that which we can mention ID, and here we can use long ID. Fine. Here we can call the method, respective method, like get user by ID, and here we need to pass this ID as an input. That's it. So this is about getting a individual user on basis of what ID is passed. Next method, we are going to use post mapping to create a new user into the database. So here we can name it like create user, and here we don't require the path variable, rather we need request body, and this is our input user which need to be created into the database, and here we can call the respective method for creating user, and this is our input object which need to be created into the database. Fine. Here we don't require the ID, only users slash users endpoint is enough. So with this we are done with our create user post mapping. Next thing, like we can add for updating the user into the database. For this we can use the patch mapping, and here we need to add the ID as well, because against which ID we are going to update the input object, that is necessary. We can say instead of update we can say modify user, and here along with the request body we need to pass the ID field as well as an input. So we can copy it and edit it here. We can save it. Need to add the import for patch mapping. Fine. Now here instead of create user we need to call update user. Fine. With this, like this input modified user object will get updated against this ID into the database and return the updated user as a return type. Fine. So this is about patch method. Next thing, like we are going to delete user. For deleting user, like the return type should be string, and here we don't require to pass the actual object, but the ID is enough. And here here it is a modify user, so we can change. Okay, here we need to change, this is for delete and this is for modify, so we need to change it here for for delete user. Fine. So here we don't require the request body it here, can delete it, and here we can call the respective method like it should be delete user. But here what we can do, first of all we can retrieve our user object from the database, and for that we can use this method. For the given ID we are retrieving the existing object into the from the database, and if this object is not null, then we are going to delete that object from the database, and we can call this method it here. Now the delete method is returning some string, so we need to create one string to hold the delete message delete successful message. So this delete string will hold the message which is returning from the service delete method, and here we are going to add this return this delete message, and here the data type should be return data type should be string, not an object, and we can save it. Fine. Now here what we have done, like for deleting the object, this is the input ID for which we have retrieved the existing object from the database. Now if that object is not null, then we are calling this service method, and it will return this message post successful deletion. So in order to hold this message, we need to create one string variable, and inside which that message will get stored and will get returned as a return type. So with this, like, we are done with all the CRUD operations. Now let us add one more annotation, like cross origin we can add, because we are going to get the request from the browser as well, so we need it. Now we have added all these things, right? Let us open the user part. Now here we have created a user, and in order to, now whenever we create a new user on the MongoDB side, it will generate a long string of ID, and which is like uh, so actually, in fact, like we need to increment this ID in a series of 1 to, like, increment by 1. So in order to achieve that, we need to create some sequence. So let us create those sequence. Okay, first we can create one class. For that, let us say database sequence, and here we can annotate it by using document, and here we can mention the collection, and collection name we can use users sequence. Fine. Inside this we can add one ID parameter, and another is sequence parameter, sequence property. We can provide the getter setters for these two. We can add one constructor as well. Fine, we can save it. So we have created one database sequence. Now we need to create one more object, like we need to create one service to create to generate the sequence. Inside service we can add that service. Let's say we can create one sequence generator service, and we can annotate it using service stereotype. Next we can attwire, we can add one Mongo operations as an field, and here we can add one attwire method as an So let us add one constructor. Fine. Now let us create the actual method for generating the sequence, which will be returning long, and here we can name our method like generate sequence, and this method will take sequence name as an input, and here we need to use the database sequence. Let's say here we can mention some counter, and here we can use our MongoDB operations and call find and modify, and here we can mention first like it's a query. Inside this we can add where clause. Inside this we can add actual ID, and we can say what is, if it is a sequence name. Now here for the second parameter we need to add new update, and we can call the actual increment method on this, like let's say increment, and here we can pass sequence, and finally here we can add options. Here options we can add bracket, and here we can call return new, which is true, and next we can call assert, which is again true, and finally we can pass our object user.class. We need to add the required imports. You can save it. Okay. We can import org.spring framework data dot mongodb dot core dot query dot, we can add query dot criteria dot where. We can add dot query, fine. Next thing we need to add for these options, for options we can add it here like after code we can add find and modify options dot options. Fine. So what we have done, we can format it. Fine. Now here we need to return the actual sequence. After this, return if not objects dot is null, and here we can mention our counter, and if there is a no means if there is a entry for the counter, already counter is existed, then return the counter, or else we can return the new counter if it's a new record. Sorry, so here if counter is existed, it will return the sequence for that, or else it will create a one for a new record. You can save it. So you can cross check where id is name sequence name. After that we have update and see, and here is our sequence. And here actually we need to increment the sequence by 1. It's a return new true, and here assert true, and this is the user class for which you can save it. Okay, so here actually class should not be the user, rather it should be database sequence. Fine, we can save it now. So this is about generating the sequence. Fine. So we have created this database sequence. This method will generate the sequence for new user. So we need to create one more class to listen. So whenever we create whenever we create a new user into the database, that time we should listen that, let's say user listener we can create, and we can annotate it using, let's say, component, and here we need to extend it with abstract Mongo event listener, and inside this we need to pass our document which is user. That's it. Now here we can add our one field, like we need to give sequence generator class it here service. and here we can add one constructor for fields. Fine. So user listener. Now we can add actual one method with name on. Before we convert this, we need to add this, like let's say before convert event. We can use this event, and here we can pass our user object. Next thing, like we can mention this event as event, and now inside this we can check if event dot get source dot get id is less than 1. If it is less than 1, then we can say, we can copy this, we can set id. If this is the case, then we can set id, and for this we are going to call the method on this sequence generation service, and the method is like generate sequence, and here we are going to pass our user dot sequence name. So inside user, what is the name of the, yes, this should be the sequence name. So can we call this, complete it. Sequence name, we can copy it here to the listener. User dot sequence is not visible. Completion. Okay, fine. Okay, so it should be public. You can save it. Fine. Seems good. Now actually we are done with all the incrementer part, like in order to auto increment id by 1. So what we have done, like we have created one database sequence it here. Okay, and it will actually, it has the string id and long sequence number, and here we are going to use some sequence generator service which will help us to generate a new sequence using this database sequence. And finally we have created one listener. so that this listener will use this sequence generation service and generate one new sequence and set as an ID for us. So whenever, so this will get used whenever we create our new user into the database. So with this, like, we have implemented all the CRUD operations along with the sequence generation part of the MongoDB. So let us test our APIs using Postman. So let me rebuild it and run it so that we can cross verify if everything is working fine. We can close this application and rebuild it using run as maven install. Uh, class test is failing, so we can, for the time being, we can comment it out and we can build it. We can run as a Spring Boot application. Okay, so I think inside user controller we have repeated some method twice. User controller method, patch mapping. Okay, so this is patch mapping, and for delete it we should use delete mapping, not the patch mapping, so due to which it was failing. Let us add, fine, we can save it. Now we can build it again. Now we can run it. Fine. We can see our application has started successfully on port 80888, so which we have configured in our application.properties file. So this is the port. Now let us check on the Postman side by using some, let's say we can use 808 and here our users. Now this API we can call for the get method and check. So now it is showing the empty array because on the database side it's a empty collection, so there is no data. We can check there is no data. Now let us add one data here. So we can see one record is added using post mapping. Fine, that means post mapping is working fine. We can add one more record, let's say Sam, and here email for Sam, and here we can say it's a Pune and we can send it. Fine, Sam is created successfully. If you call the get method, we can see it is showing the two records now which we have just created. If you want to cross check the second get mapping, which is for returning a particular user by ID, so for this we need to pass the ID and a particular record should get returned as a response. Yes, we can see it is returning. So this is about the second get mapping. Now let us try for patch mapping, and here for patch mapping we can use patch HTTP method, and here we need to pass the actual object which we need to modify, or we can pass the modified object at here. Let's say ID is a 2 and here instead of Sam we can see it's a Kevin, and here we can add the Kevin email, and instead of Pune we can modify it to Mumbai and we can update it. You can see the record is successfully updated, and if we go it here and call the get method once again to cross check it. The second record should show the Kevin record fine, which is working fine. So this is about patch method, and for delete API we are going to use this delete method, and here we are going to delete the second object from here. So for deleting we just need to pass the ID, and the record is you can see the record is deleted successfully from the database. User is deleted successfully. Now if you go and cross check into the database, we can see we have this record, which only record because we have deleted the second record. If we want to try for the addition, we can see this is, and if you cross check in the database by calling find, this record is added fine. So this is working fine for the all the CRUD operations. With this, like, we are done with our CRUD implementation part as well as testing with our Postman. Now let us focus on the UI part. So let us create our UI application. Let me close the existing VS Code instance. We can open a new VS Code. And here inside terminal we can create our new application with name npm create latest, and here we can mention our actual project name, which is a user-web. This is related to the web. We can choose React and JavaScript. Now we can go to our user web folder and call npm install. It will install the dependencies for us. Fine. Now we can run this using command npm run dev and check if the application is running fine. Now this is the folder user web, and inside this we have these files, default files and folders. We can see our application is running fine and good. Now next thing, like, we can clear the content from this one, from app.jsx first. And next, here we can remove the unused variables as well as this, and we can save it. Next thing, we can remove content from it. App.css, sorry, app.css, we can remove it and we can save it. Now you can see everything is cleared. Now go to index.html. Here we can remove this icon, as well as we can change this title, and we can say full stack plus React plus Spring Boot plus MongoDB. We can save it. Fine. Now let us add our actual design, our layout. Let's say this is our div, main div. We can name it like main container. Next thing, like inside this we can mention one header, and we can name it like, we can copy this part, edit it here. After that, we need to create one more div for add and edit panel. We can see it's add panel. Inside this we can add div. You can say its class name, we can give add panel div. Fine. Now let us add some CSS part for this one. We can mention some width as 585 pixel, height as an fit content, and let's say margin left 75 pixel. Fine. Next thing, we can add for h3, we can add some color as an fine. And next thing, we can add text align as a center. We can save it. Seems good. We can add for add panel. Width we can mention same. Can mention the height as an, instead of this one, 60 pixel. And here we can add border 1 pixel solid. Background color we can add, save it. Fine. So this is about search, add filter, add. Now we can add one add panel div as well, it here and here. We can mention some margin left as an 5 pixel. and display as an inline block. Here we are going to show some inputs, like first is for name, next is for email, and next is for address. So that should be in one line, so we are adding this. Fine. Next thing, like we can add one input box. Inside this add panel, input text, and here we can name it like name, id as a name. Before this input we need to add one label, and here name, and we can give its a name as a name, or we can save it. Fine. After this we need to add one line break. Seems good. For this input we can add class name as add panel input. Fine. And here we can add for input, can add border 1 pixel solid. Next we can add border radius. Height we can mention 25 pixels somewhere, and width we can mention somewhere 140 pixel and save it. Add panel input, can check if we have given the same name. Seems good. So this is about the name. Next thing, like we can give similar way we can add for email and address. So we can copy this. So this is for email, and same we can add it for name and id, and this is for address, and this we can copy for this. We can save it. Fine. Now next thing, like we need to add one add and edit button. After this div we can add one button. Let's say it's a add button, and similar way we need to add for cancel button. We can name it like add btn, and here we can name it like cancel button. You can save it. Now we can add some css for this add and cancel button. Can copy this border and border radius part. It is now here we can mention the width as an 60 pixel somewhere, and height we don't need, like we can reduce this, and we can add font size 11 pixel somewhere. Line height as an 15 pixel, and we can save it. Can add height. Fine. Similar way we can add for cancel button. And here we can add some margin left. Seems good. Can add background color. Can add forward button as well. Seems good. Next thing, like we can add our search box it here. We can create one new div. We can input search. We need to create, can say search input. Same we can keep it for ID. We can add one placeholder as an enter user here, and here we can give class name for this one, and this is the search input search. Fine. And we can give some CSS for this input search. Can add this border and border radius part it here. Height again 25 pixel. Width we can add somewhere. Seems good. And background color we can add some background color. Okay, fine. We need to add some margin top it here, like let's say somewhere 35 pixel, and we need to add margin left, which is same as this one. Seems good. Now we can add one with this, like now we can add our actual table part. After this can mention one, it's a table, and here we can give our table name as a table. Fine. We can add some CSS for this one as a table. We can add some margin top. Width as in somewhere 585 pixel. Height as a fit content. border as a 1 pixel solid. Next thing, like we can add border collapse as in collapse, and text align center. We can save it. Fine. Now we can do, like we can add we can use now the table part. Here we can add some for table. This is the class name for table. Need to save it. We can mention some height, let's say 70 pixels. It should be pixel. Okay, fine. Now let us do one thing. We can add some. So we can do one thing now. We can use our table part. Now we are going to use the React table library. So let us populate the table with column data and render the data using the functions and hooks available in the React table library. So for that, first we need to use, like we need to add the libraries. Let's say using command npm install. It's a React table dependency we need to add, and next, like axios again we need to add in order to give call to our REST APIs. So we can check the package.json. We can see the dependency is added successfully. We can run our application now. Fine. Now let us use the table part. Like here we are going to use the React table. First of all, we can import this, and here we can import from React table. These are the hooks, and we are going to use these hooks like use table. Next thing, like we are going to use. Fine. Now let us add one, define some constant. For tables we require the data is a user's data, so we can define one constant for, let's say, users, and it's a set users, and we can mention use state, and it's an array. Fine, you can save it. Next thing we can do, we require one constant for columns, and for columns we can use react.use nemo, and here we can mention for columns, like this is the initialization array, and here we can mention first the structure we need to follow, like it's a header first, We can name our header like it's let's say it's id, user id, and we can mention the accessor, and accessor name is, let's say we can give anything like this. So basically this is the first column, and this is the header which will get shown on the UI of browser, and this is the accessor through which it will call this header. So this is for one column. Let us add for rest of the columns. So it should be name, this is the name, and this is the email, and again this is like email, and it's a address. Fine, we can save it. Seems good. Now what we can do, like we can use the functions available in the user table. First of all, we can create our table object, table constant. Let's say we can use table. Inside this we can use the functions like okay. So for tables we need to populate the columns first. Next, like, so here we can mention one more constant for data, and we can again use react.use memo. Inside this we can add this users data, and we can initialize it with the dependency here. Fine. Now this data will contain the users data, and this is the column which we need to render. Now let's say it's a data and it's users. Now we can complete this, and we can this is the table. Now we have created the columns, data, and this is the table. Now instead of using the actual table, we can use the particular functions which are available in it, like get table properties. Now get table body properties. Next, like header groups. Next, like rows, prepare row. So these many options will require at initial, so we can keep adding the more functions as we need. Now we are going to populate our table using these hook functions and hooks available. Now let us add it here. First of all, for table we need to add the function like get table properties. Next, for we can add it like header groups dot map. On this header we can say for each header group we are going to render the tr, and here we are going to call the function like hg dot header group. get header group props. We can call this function. Here we need to define some key as an hg dot id. Fine. Now here for hg dot headers dot for each column, now we are going to render the column, and for rendering the column we are going to use the t-head, and here again we need to call the function like for columns. You can call the function on column get header properties, and here we can add key as an column.id. Fine. Here we need to render the actual header it here, and we can render by calling the function column.render, and here we can pass this header. That's it. You can save it. We can say this column header is getting rendered once we save this. Now we have rendered the column headers. Similar way we need to add the body part. This is the column part. Now let us add the body part as well. So this is the t-head part. Okay, so this is t-head, and we can put it inside t-head. Now for t-body we need to call this. For t-body the function which we are going to call, like it's a table body properties. Inside this we can call for rows dot map, and for each row we are going to render the tr. You can say it's a return, it's a tr, and here we are going to call the function it here, which is like row dot get row props, and here we are going to give some key as an row.id. Fine. Now here for each row we need to call the prepare row and pass it the row before we render the row, and here for each row dot cells we can map on cells, and for each cell we can render data part, so we can call td, and here again we are going to call the function like cell dot get cell properties, and here we are going to pass some key as an cell dot id, and here we are going to actually render the cell, and here is the what all exactly we are going to render. It's a cell file. Fine, we can save it. Seems good. Now here cell get cell properties, it's a cell id, and we are going to render the cell. You can save it. Now if we check on the database side, we have data, at least 2 records, but it is not showing any record as such because we have not given any call to the database APIs as of now. So let us give a call to database backend APIs so that we can retrieve the data from there. So let us define one constant, like first we need to add the import for axios so that we can give call the REST APIs from front end side. Here we can define one constant like get all users, and here we can call the method on axios, right? Get method, and here we can pass actual URL which is localhost 8088 with support, and here we can say users as an endpoint, and here we can call dot then, and for response we can use console.log. We can log the res.data it here, and here for set users we can use set this res.data. Let's save it. Now still it is not showing any data because we need to give a call to this get all users. Now we can use effect, and inside this we can give a call to this for get all users method. We can call it fine. We need to initialize it with dependency here, fine. Now we can save it. Now it is showing the table record as expected. Okay, now this table is a bit left side, so we can align it, and here our margin left we need to add it to table. Similar way we have added for our panel, not for panel but here same left margin we can add it here, and we can save it. Seems good. Now let us add some CSS for header and other parts. Now we can add some header. Now for header we can add some border as an, copy this, we can mention some font size, and line height. Let's say font size 15 pixel for header and 10 pixel line height, and save it. Now let us take 15 itself. You can save it. Fine. Now here we can add some background color as well. Seems good. Now similar way we can add for TD. We can mention it as a 20, and here we can mention is for TD it's 18, and we can save it. can add fit content here. Seems good. Now here you can mention it's a 15 and here again 15. You can save it. Seems good. Now we can add one tr and child e1 color it here. Let's say for e1 rows we can add some color, and background color we can add as an seems good. Now let us add fine table color. So we are done with table color. Now let us do one thing. Now let us add our action buttons to this. Fine. So to add the action buttons, we can do it here. Like we can copy this header part. Similar way we can add one more header, as in here we can say it's an header for edit. Accessor is again edit. Here we can add one id part as well, and we can mention it as an edit. And after this we can mention some cell, we can say props, and here we can call the button, add the button, and here we can mention the class name as an edit button, and here we can mention this as an edit button. Save it. Fine. So this is about the edit button. Similar way we can add for delete button. We can save it. Seems good. We can write some color for add and delete button, edit and delete button. And copy it here. Here we can mention it's a 10 pixel, and here somewhere 12 pixel. Save it. We can add some border radius. And here we can mention some width as in 50 pixel. Fine. And same for delete as well. For delete button we can add so delete button. Then save it. Here we can add some background color. Let's say here for edit button we can add the green color. We can copy the color from here, and same we can add for green color, and for delete button we can add some red color. Save it. Fine, seems good. Now let us do one thing. We have edit and delete button. Now get API is working fine, So this is our get API, get all users. Now let us add functionality for post mapping so that we can add a user into the database. Now let us check. So whenever we click on this add button, it should get added to the database. Now before that, we need to capture what entry we are adding into this input boxes into some bean object. So let us create one object, like let's say it's a user data. You can say set user data, and here we can mention the use state and mention it's a name and it's a blank actually, and it's a email, again it's a blank, and next is a address. Fine, you can say it. Now we have this user data and use set user data. Fine, next thing we can do, like whenever it should get copied to this user data, so here we can add some for input box. Here we can add, so for value you can say user data dot set as an user data dot name. So this is about the user data dot name. So this value, whenever we input something, the value will get stored in this user dot data name, user data dot name. Similar way, whenever we change something, this value will get changed, so should get changed. So we can use on change event it here. Here we can say handle change event we need to use, and here we can call this function as an handle change. It's somewhere it here, let's say constant handle change, and here we can mention it set user data, and here we can say it's a user data, and here is a e dot target dot name. Can mention e dot target dot value. Fine, we can save it. Whenever we change this value, this changed value on change event will get called, and the changed value will get saved into this user data. Fine, now same way we need to repeat this for email as well as for address. Fine, we can save it. Now let us check by calling let us try by, now it will get set to the user data, whatever entry we enter it here. Next thing we need to do, like we need to whenever we click on add button, it should submit to the database. Now we need to call one function, we can copy it, and here we are going to use this method as a, this on click of add button, it should on button add. So this is our add button, and here we can say on click event, and it's we can say it's a handle submit, or we can say handle add. Here we can say, okay, we can use submit, which seems good, submit, and same here, and to submit here we can use it here for this method. Here you can say e dot event default. Next thing, like here we are going to call the method like post. As we are going to save it into the database, we can call async and await it here use, and here we need to pass the user data as the input bean, which need to be submitted into the database. Now here, once it is done, we don't need to set it. Now we can save it. Here is the response. Now check what will happen it here. Fine. Here I can give its name like ram at gmail.com, and address is again like somewhere, let's say Mumbai, and we can click on add button. We can see ram is added successfully, but only after we refresh the page. Okay, so let us do one thing, like it should get called without refreshing the page. So for that we can call, okay, after this we can call this method get all miss. So here we can say we can all clear all method we can use, because we are going to clear as well as calling the new list. So whenever we do add something, so this get all users will get called from here, and this method we are going to call from after this post method. We can save it. Fine. Now let us add one more entry. Let's say sham at gmail.com, and here address it's like Bangalore. Now we don't need to refresh, it is getting added as expected. Fine. Now let us do one thing, like we can cross check into the database. Yes, the same entries are getting added into the database as well as expected. Now let us do, we are done with our post mapping, like addition of new user or creation of new user. Now let us do like edit part. So whenever we click on this edit part, so once we click on cancel button, this data will get cleared, and the cancel button should be disabled at first. So you can define one constant as an show cancel, and here you state initially it should be false. Now here, where is the cancel button, there exactly we need to call this like it's disabled, and here we can say we can show cancel. Now if we make a negation, then it will show it disabled. Okay, fine, we'll save it. We can see it is disabled as expected. Now it initial. Now whenever we click on edit button, this on click of edit, these row should get populated to this input box. So on click of edit or edit button, so here we can go it here, and this is our edit button, and here we need to add some on click event, and here for on click we can add this. Here we can say handle update, and here we can call props dot from props we can access cell, and from cell we can access row, and from row we can access the original, and we can save it. Okay, fine. So this is the handle update. Now we can call this function it here somewhere, like let's say it's a constant handle update, and here we are going to pass this row, and this is the user, and here we are going to set user data with user. Fine, and we can save it. Now let us check what will happen. Set user data with user handle update. Okay, fine. So this shell should be small. You can save it. Now let us check. Yes, fine. Now it is getting populated as expected. Now let us do one thing, like we need to complete the edit functionality. So here we can do it here, like this is our post. So whenever we click on edit handle add submit, first of all, whenever I click on edit button, this add button should get replaced with update button. So this is the add. Here we can check, like let's say here user data dot id. If id is there, in that case it should be update, or else it should be add. Fine. Now let us check. It is, yes, it is reflecting. Now it is update. Fine. Now whenever we click on update button, it should submit it. Now this is our same function we are going to call handle submit for addition as well as for updation. Now here we are going to check if user data dot id is there. In that case, go for updation, or else go for addition. So here we can copy it here, and for updation we need to call patch method, and here we are going to call we are going to add, like here user data dot id, and this is the actual user data we are going to pass for updation purpose. Fine, we can save it. Now let us check. Now here here this is the Ram and this is Sham. Now instead of Sham, we can say, we can name it like Kumar, and here again we can name it like kumar@gmail.com, and we can change it to Pune and update. Now we can see it is getting updated as expected. Now if you cross check into the database, we can see it should be Kumar. Yes, fine, it is reflecting. With this, like, we are done with our update functionality. Now let us do one thing. Now let us start adding our search functionality. Fine. So last thing, like we can check for our delete functionality. After that we can implement the core functionality as such. So here for delete functionality we need to call the onClick event similar to this one. We can copy this, and this is our delete, and here we can add onClick, and instead of handle update we can say it's a delete update, and we can copy this, and where exactly we have added the handle update it here. Okay, fine. Now we can add one constant as an delete update, delete user we should say, we can say handle of delete, it should be handle delete. Fine. Now here this is the handle delete, and here we are going to call the similar function like this one for this delete. Fine. And here we are going to call a sync as we are going to delete it, and here we are going to call the delete method, and here we don't need to pass the actual data, only id is enough. And for here we can see it's a user, and here we should call user.id sync. Okay, now fine, seems good. Now here this is about deletion. Now we need to first confirm about if the user want to really delete the record or not is confirmed. We can call window.confirm, and here we can check whether he want to delete or not. This is the next thing, like we can check if is confirmed is if the user want to delete, then go for delete operation, or else do not delete it. Now we can save it. Next thing, fine. Now let us check what happens. Let's say if you want to delete this last record. Now let us check on the UI part. Okay, so you can see the confirmation is showing. Once we click on OK, then refresh it. Fine, the record is getting deleted, but only after we refresh it. Now let us do one thing. It here we can do window dot location dot reload function we can call, and now we can check. Now if we delete for RAM, fine, it is getting deleted without refreshing the page. So delete functionality is working fine. With this, like we have implemented and tested all the CRUD functionalities and its integration from UI to backend. Now let us do one thing. Now let us start implementing the search function search filter. Now here we for search filter we can use some hooks like use global filters, global filter. Okay, fine. And here we can use the same filter it here. Let's say this is our table, and here we can add use global filter, and here we can set this, set to global filter again, and inside here we can mention some constant, and here we can say global filter, and here we can mention as an state, and state it here as well, and save it. Now here this global filter we can use it our where exactly the input search is there. In that place we need to use it, input search. So this is our input search. Fine. Here we can mention as a value, and here we can say it's a global filter or it's a blank. Blank means it is showing all the records, and if it has any text then accordingly it will filter out the data. So and here we need to add some on change event as well. As we change the text, accordingly the data should get changed. The filter the data should get changed. So here we can say set global filter and say e dot target dot value. That's it. Now here if you want to check, fine. So let us do one thing. Yet here we can add one more record. Let's say Kiran @gmail.com. So what we can do it here, we can add some more data so that we can so, apply our search, sorting and pagination part. Let us delete the existing records from here so that we can add more records. Fine. Now I have some records prepared. Yes, we can copy this. git sort by toggle props. This property we can use to render the data. Okay, fine. Now here if we check, yes, we can see it is getting sorted as we want for all the columns. Fine. Now let us do one thing. Here we can add one more. For here we can show some arrows so that it will look good. And here we can add some span, and here we can say column dot is sorted DSC. If that is the case, then here add some up arrow, or else add some down arrow. Fine. So to insert the up and down arrow, so we can use the Windows colon option, and here we can add some emojis, like let's say here Windows colon we can use and add it. Fine. For down arrow we can use the similar way. This is the down arrow. Fine. Remove this unnecessary part. Fine. Now we can check. So you can see arrow is appearing for ascending and descending order, which seems good. If you want to insert the icon for ascending and descending arrow, you can add as well as per. Or if you want shortcut of emojis, you can use as I show, just added it here. Fine. So we are done with our sorting logic. Now last thing, we are going to implement the pagination part. Let us do that. Again here we need to use the hook like use pagination, and same we need to add a table part. Here is our table part, and here fine, use pagination. Now for pagination we need to use page, not rows, right? So here we can use a page, and same page we need to use while iterating. We need to iterate on page, not on rows. Can do it, and we can save it. Fine. Now by default it is showing somewhere 10 per page. It's a by default size. Now let us do one thing. We can reduce this size so that we have only 15 records. At least it should show 3 pages per page. It is showing the it should show 5 records. So for that, what we can do, it here we can mention some sorry, not it here. Here we can mention some initial state, and here we can mention size as 5, and we can save it. Okay. So it should be page size, and save it. Yes, fine, it seems good. Now it is showing 5 pages, 5 records per page. Now let us do one thing here. We need to show the buttons after once the table ends. After this we add some pagination div we can add, and we can give its class name as an pagination div. Fine. And here we can add buttons, like first is for first page. Class name we can add page button. This is for first button. Similar way we can add for previous, and this is for next, and this is for last. And we can add CSS for all this, like with here we can add, we can say margin top we can add for 5 pixel, and here we can add margin left similar to this. We can copy it and edit it here and save it. Seems good. Now here for the button part, like it's a dot page, better we can copy page btn, and here is our page btn. Here we can add, mention some margin left as in 5 pixel. Seems good. And we can add some color, like background color, like seems good. Now next thing, like we can add for this button border 1 pixel solid and border radius as in 5 pixel, and we can save it. Seems good. Next thing, we can add some height as in 45. Seems good. Next thing we can do, like we can add here, after previous button we need to add some count and index. So here we can add some span, on span, and here we can mention it's an page count of, here it should be page count it here, and this should be the page index, and we need to add it at here upside somewhere it here, page index, and page count we can add it at here, and we can save it. Okay, so now we have just added the margin left it here. Now whenever we click on next button, it should take us to the next page. So let us add that part. Now this is the next button. So whenever we click on this button, it should show next page, and similar way whenever we click on previous button, it should show previous page. Now we can edit these entries at here. Let's say it's a previous page and it's a next page. We can save it. Now let us check. Whenever we click on next button, it is taking us to the next page. Similar way, whenever we click on previous page, it is showing the previous page. Fine, seems good. Now next and previous is working fine. Now we need to disable first and previous button. So whenever we are on the first page, so let's say here we can add disabled, and here for disabled we can say here we can say can previous page. If there is no previous page, then disable it. Similar way we can add it for the previous and first. Now here we can add for next button, we can say if there is no next page, then it should disable it, and here again like it should disable whenever there is no next page for last button. And here we need to add the entries for previous, can previous page and can next page. So this is the previous page. Fine, we can save it, seems good. Now we can see this is disabled. Now whenever we click on next button and once we reach on last page, so next and last is getting disabled, so which is as expected. Now whenever we click on last button, it should take us to the last page, and similarly whenever we click on first button, it should take us to the first page. Okay, so for last button we can add it here on click functionality. So we can say go to page, and here for last we can say it's a page index, sorry, page count -1, and similar way we can add for first page, and here it should be the 0th count, or we can say 0th count. Fine. Now here and here it should be 0, and we need to add this go to page in our hook here, table hook, it's here. Now we can check. Okay, so here we need to this was missing. Now we can check. Yes, fine, seems good. Now let us click on last button. Yes, it is taking us to the third page, which is last page, and if we click on first page, it is taking us to the first page. So with this, like, we are done with all the CRUD operations which we have discussed before we start our video. So I hope you must have enjoyed this video.
So I will request you to please like and subscribe this video or the channel. Thank you so much for watching this video.